pledging the flag over there. Thank you, Craig. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. I just want to welcome everyone for showing up tonight, and the Historical Society for inviting the board for this informational session, and the community. So without further ado, though, I would like to hand it off to Cynthia and enjoy.
Great. Thank you, Mike. And we've got a few folks coming in, and we'll certainly let them enter. But while we are here, I do want to thank Mike and the town board. We have Marion Auspitz here, I see, and Charlie Dykus. Welcome. And I know that Catherine Mostello could not be with us, but her husband is here representing, Ron. Hi. And my husband, Elliot Werner, thought the thing started at 6:30. So you'll see him skulking in. I don't know how he could not know that, with all the great publicity that has gone out, both from Kathy McMahon of the Historical Society and Carol Mackin on the town. And but anyway, he did. And I also want to have our board members stand up and be recognized. We have a nice turnout, please. All right, Anne, Jim Metcalf, Kathy and Frank McMahon, Craig Marshall, Rich Morse, Barbara Seelbach. Am I missing anybody? Okay, great. It's good to have a nice turnout. And I also want to thank Will Tatum for being here. He's our county historian. I forgot, and I see Marge Fountain back there. Hi, Marge. And it's great that he's here, and you'll learn that the county has been very generous with us, and we're very grateful to that. And I'm also delighted to see that Bob Turner and Art Weiland from the Cemetery Board are with us. Art and Patrick Hancock. I've never met you, Pat, but I'm glad to meet you. So that's great. So we have 3 wonderful board members from the Cemetery Association, and we are welcoming you and delighted that you could join us. I should tell you that this event is being videotaped, and it will be viewable later on the town board YouTube channel, right? And we might be able to get it on ours too, if that's possible, on the YouTube channel for the Historical Society. So that'll be great. That'll be great. And as you know, we are here this evening to talk about the restoration of the Creek Meeting House. It is wonderful to see a large turnout. We didn't quite know what to expect, but I think it's gratifying to see the interest on the part of the community to be coming here and learning about this restoration. We organized this workshop specifically as informational. We want to let the community know what we've been doing, what we're planning, what we're hoping to do, and we also want to urge you to know that in no way is this a fundraising appeal. We are not looking to the town of Clinton for financial support, but we are grateful to the town of Clinton for helping to organize this because, of course, the imprimatur of the town gives this a broader audience and helps us get the word out. So thank you. So I'm going to start. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes. So relax, take a breath. But I want to talk to you about what the Creek Meeting House is and why it is important. The Creek Meeting House was built during the American Revolution between 1777 and 1780 as a house of worship for Quakers, members of the Society of Friends. It's owned by the Town of Clinton Historical Society. We use the first floor for meetings like this and an exhibit hall and for social gatherings. It's available for rentals as well. This, Ooh, I don't know if that's going to hold.
It should.
Is it? I hope so.
I think that if you push here, it'll pop up this way.
I better not lean on it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. That was scary. And the second floor houses a local history archive. About 2,000 people attend programs annually here. Some 500 of them come on Community Day, which is held on the grounds surrounding the Creek Meeting House and the immediate area. And because of the historic interior of this building was removed in the early 20th century, one of the major motivations for our restoration is to try to correct the false impression that this interior gives, which we believe will help everybody have a better understanding not only of this building, but of really the very important history of this community in the 18th century. It's on the National Register of Historic Places and relates to some very important narratives in American history. Friends whose religion required their opposition to warfare tested the limits of religious toleration during the American Revolution. That's a little understood fact that we hope to have people understand better. And then in 1767, before the Revolution, the Quakers in Dutchess County, including members of the Creek Meeting, were the first in New York to manumit, that is, free, the people whom they held in slavery. And there's another interesting story. The practice of equality between the sexes is represented in Quaker meeting houses, characteristic double front doors, and interiors with movable partitions that could accommodate separate business meetings for men and women. As they went into worship, these movable partitions were raised and the group worshiped together in unity. The Creek Meeting House is the earliest extant example in New York of this form, which is called the doubled plan. The first meeting house of that form at all was built outside of Philadelphia in 1768. So you can see how this relates to some very important architectural history as well. I'm going to talk about how the meeting house will preserve and continue this building's nearly 250-year history as the gathering place for residents of the town of Clinton. Just stop and think about that. People of our community have been coming to this building for nearly 250 years. And we're going to try to continue that into the 21st century and beyond. Overall, the restoration will make the building ADA accessible. It will incorporate necessary structural repairs. It'll restore the historic interior of the building, update the heating, ventilating, and non-existent air conditioning systems. It'll help get the building into compliance with modern building codes, and we are planning to introduce improvements that will help it better withstand the effects of climate change. The project architects, Jack Waite and Shannon Brown, are with us tonight, and when I finish, they're going to do a slideshow that will explain all of these things in greater detail. But before we do that, I want to also say that the Historic Structures Report, the Historical Society commissioned a Historic Structures Report, which is a foundational research document that is the basis of all the research and planning that is going into this restoration. And from it, we learned that there's a lot of original historic building fabric remaining. We don't have to make it up, it's still here. It's just hidden. It revealed that the original floors are beneath the 20th century hardwood that you're standing on or sitting on. The woodwork around the windows and doors, the panels across the back wall, the windows, the structural system in the attic is phenomenal, and other important elements remain intact. The restoration is planned for 4 phases, but that may change as we raise money or as our plans change. We're happy to say phase 1 is complete. Phase 1 was making the building ADA accessible. You all walked in on a nice bluestone walk across a perfectly level entranceway into this room. That's a big improvement, and we're very grateful to Dutchess County for a grant that made that possible. In addition to that, we installed an ADA accessible restroom and put in emergency lights that help people who are hearing disabled or sight disabled to understand where the exits are. We also at that time, again with the help of the county, and in particular the county historian, had a grant that helped us do the beginning of necessary masonry repair, repointing of the stone, and both gable ends of the building are now repointed, and hopefully they're keeping us free of bats in our belfry. Phase 2 is the restoration of the historic interior and the installation of a modern HVAC, energy efficient heating system. Also, lighting, code mandated safety improvements. It will remove the 20th century kitchen, which is a fire hazard to have it in the 18th century building, remove this unsightly ductwork and the inappropriate lighting. Windows will be repaired and made operable. Storm windows and installation will be installed. Historic plaster, wooden finishes, and floors will be restored. And most exciting of all, the historic opening in the center of this ceiling of the main will be reopened and to give people an understanding of this building, how it functioned with second-story galleries exposed. It was almost a little Quaker cathedral when you think about it. Balconies on the second floor, everyone facing to be able to look at that end of the room where the ministers and elders sat. It will be dramatic, it'll be spiritual, and it'll be beautiful. And we hope people will want to be in this building and will want to rent it for their social events, their exhibits, whatever they have in mind. We think this will be a real attraction for the community. It will essentially be a second community center for our town. Phase 3 will entail the reconstruction and expansion of a clapboard addition that exists on the west side of the building. It was built in the 1930s, and it's in disrepair, and unfortunately we discovered it's infested with powder post beetles. It contains one inaccessible bathroom, which is basically falling apart, and a makeshift mechanical room with an oil furnace that's near the end of its lifespan. A new addition, similar in massing and material to the existing addition, will be constructed. It'll be larger, it'll have a basement added, and will contain a second accessible bathroom, a fully sprinklered kitchen that is separate from the meeting house, separated by a fire-rated door, and a code-mandated additional means of egress. The outdated furnace will be replaced by an energy-efficient heat pump system, and a new mechanical room and storage will be housed in the basement. New electrical wiring and historically appropriate lighting fixtures will be provided. Archaeology will be done prior to excavating the basement, and a new septic system will be installed. So it goes from the sublime to the absolutely necessary. The building has been maintained well, but has not had many of the upgrades that one would need to be up to date today. Phase 4 is very far in the future, but it will involve developing a plan for permanent exhibits to tell the history of our town, which we hope to affix to the walls, and also to decide how and to what extent we will restore the seating. I think there'll just be representations of, we don't know how, but it's basically the space is going to be open, but there will be some indication that this, of course, had seating when it was a Quaker meeting house. So then you might ask, well, how is this Creek meeting house to be used? Well, first of all, we hope to be able to open it regularly, perhaps on Sunday afternoons during the warmer months, for weekend tours that'll enhance the public's historical understanding and increase residents' sense of community identity. Maybe it'll help us all understand exactly why our town is named for Governor George Clinton, 18th century Revolutionary War history. The restoration will also adapt the building for use as a multi-purpose community center, open for meetings, social events, performances, and exhibits, and it will continue to function as his headquarters of the Historical Society. The local history archive will be preserved either here or elsewhere. That's something that we have to work on and decide. You may say, why a community center and a historic site? Well, our town has a population, last census, of 4,065 people. These few people are widely dispersed over 38.1 square miles. People are very isolated. There is no public transportation. You hear talk about loneliness as a major epidemic in our country. Having another community gathering place here on this side of town could help address that need. Clinton's Town Hall, you all know, is located about 10 miles from the Creek Meeting House, and it is used by the community library and serves as the only community center. But they have no public meeting space of their own. They're very grateful to the town because they've essentially used the town hall board meeting space, business meeting space, for their programs. And of course, there's a constant juggling for scheduling of that space. Also, other groups, because of this shortage of space, other groups really have no options for small rental spaces, and so their needs often go unmet. The Historical Society and the library look forward to deepening their partnership by making some of the library's programs available here in the Creek Meeting House, which will also be available to other groups that may wish to use the building on a rental basis. The rental income is key because it's going to help sustain the Historical Society and the preservation of the building. Key part of the whole story. Another thing that I'd like to talk to you about for a few minutes is the economic impact. The hamlet of Clinton Corners, where you are now, contains about 24 buildings that predate 1900. It's very eligible to be a National Historic District, and we hope that the restoration of the Creek Meeting House might spur that activity and might work to protect the integrity of the little hamlet from maybe widening of the road, increasing traffic, other kinds of hazards that could have a deleterious effect on Clinton Corners. We've seen that the hamlet is, perking up. In the past 2 years, two formerly abandoned buildings have been rehabilitated, and they now host small businesses. A third residential property is being renovated. The restoration of the Creek Meeting House will, therefore, stimulate the economic development of Clinton Corners in important ways. According to a report from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, numerous studies have shown that in many parts of the country, a $1 million investment in historic rehabilitation yields markedly better effects on employment, income, state and local taxes, than an equal investment in new construction or many other economic activities. The report also shows how historic preservation helps revitalize communities, enhances property values, and stimulates heritage tourism. As you all know, tourism is a major economic factor in the Hudson Valley. A recent study on the arts and the upstate economy states that in 2019, travelers spent $4.5 billion in the Hudson Valley, which was a 66% increase from the decade before. And among the arts employment sectors measured, historic sites saw a nearly 40% growth in jobs, above the overall arts average of nearly 35%. So there's actually more vitality in history than in arts in the Hudson Valley. It's something to be very proud of and something that we all should think is worth supporting and investing in. Dutchess County Tourism describes Clinton Corners and the town of Clinton as, quote, a rural community with winding country roads, fertile farmland, scenic vistas, friendly people, and charming hamlets. The area is known for its walking and biking trails, farms, horseback riding, but it has relatively little economic development. The restored Creek Meeting House as a heritage site could contribute to Clinton's economy. Turning again to the National Trust report, quote, the economic benefits of heritage tourism are unparalleled. Quote, wherever heritage tourism has been evaluated, this basic tendency is observed. Heritage visitors stay longer, spend more per day, and therefore have a significantly greater per trip economic impact. And there is a sustainable benefit for everyone of saving a community's sense of history, distinctiveness, and identity. So in sum, I think, and I hope you will agree, that the restoration of the Creek Meeting House is a win-win for Clinton, adapting an important historic structure for modern use as a community center and enhancing its interpretation as an historic site. The Meeting House will be preserved. Its history will be presented to new audiences, both local and tourist, and residents will have access to a new community center. Use of the Creek Meeting House as a community center will facilitate that social interaction that is so necessary and also provide educational opportunities here in our widely dispersed rural community. Its restoration as a historic site will correct the present erroneous understandings of the building's history, enhance residents' pride in their community and sense of place, and create a new historic attraction for visitors. The estimated budget for this project is about $1.5 million, divided into at least 4 phases that will be undertaken as money is raised. We are writing grants to state and federal agencies and appealing to private donors, and have received several grants. $17,000 kicked us off with a grant from the Preservation League of New York State, which underwrote, in part, the Historic Structures report that is guiding the restoration. As mentioned before, the $30,000 Dutchess County Historic Infrastructure Grant Program, administered by Will Tatum, helped repair the masonry in the attic area to exclude the bats. The town of Clinton granted us $17,200 from federal ARPA money to make up for, to compensate for revenue that we lost during the pandemic. Very helpful to keep us afloat in that difficult time. We have put it toward the restoration. The town also sponsored our application to the Dutchess County Community Block Grant Program. And this is essential, $100,000 that was used to make the building compliant with the Federal Americans with Disabilities Act. As you know, that is what completed as our phase 1. In addition, generous private donors have contributed about $100,000 to date. We have only schematic plans. Full plans must be developed when the money is raised. And if, it's not a fundraising meeting, but if you're so inclined, there's a little silver box on the table on the way out if you want to make or envelopes or even a piece of paper you can take with you to understand this. I'm finished, but now I'd like to introduce Jack Waite and Shannon Brown. They are architects with John G. Waite Associates, which has offices in Albany and New York City. They specialize in the preservation, restoration, and reuse of historic properties, including many of the nation's most significant landmarks. Some of their best-known projects include Thomas Jefferson's buildings at the University of Virginia, including the famous Rotunda. They also have restored the Blair House, the President's Guest House in Washington, D.C., the Statue of Liberty, and more locally, the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Presidential Library and the Vanderbilt Mansion in Hyde Park. Jack Waite, the firm's founder, has over 40 years of experience in planning for and overseeing the restoration of adaptive reuse of historic buildings as well as the design of new structures within historic contexts. Shannon Brown, who is overseeing the Creek Meeting House project, is a principal and a project manager with John G. Wade Associates. And so I'll turn the podium over to them for the PowerPoint. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. What we'd like to do is quickly go through the process we carried out in doing the historic structure report and some of the things we found. First of all, the major purpose of the historic structure report is to collect together in one place all the information that's known about the history and the development and current condition of the building, and that allows granting agents and historic preservation regulatory agents who have reviewed all the government grants that we've done so far to have a benchmark to assess the impact of the project on the building. It consists of several major components. One is the history, which is very important with this building. We have a very fine history going back to before the building was started in 1777, prepared by Cynthia. It establishes not only what happened to the building at different times, but also puts the Creek Meeting House in a general context of Quaker meeting houses. And one thing that the history established is that, as Cynthia said, the Creek Meeting House is a very early example of this type of meeting house. It's very similar to the ones constructed about the same time in Pennsylvania, and this is really second to none of any of those. This is a very important building. It survived with much of its historic building fabric intact. What you see here is essentially the original building hidden by a lot of fur. It's the same thing. There.
We can't lean on it.
Yeah, you can't push.
No.
I'll probably do that too.
Well, it is portable.
So much, yeah.
Yep. Much of the original building fabric is hidden by later additions to the building, so it's not a matter of recreating things that were taken out of the building. It's uncovering the basic fabric which is still here. The most important change was the flooring in of the second floor to provide basically a dance hall upstairs. Originally, this space encompassed the whole of the original building, and there's a second floor gallery around here. The space was pretty spectacular, and it was a really inviting room to be in. It's very different from what you perceive now. And that was done in the 1930s when this was occupied by the Grange. The Grange was a very important owner of this building because after the Quakers left in the early 20th century, the Grange came in and used the building until the Historical Society took over. They had to make certain modifications, but being a very frugal organization, they did it with a minimum of modifications to the historic structure, and that allows the entire building to be preserved. These are some of the photographs that are included in the historic structure report. This helped us to figure out things like when the roofs were changed, how they're modified. This is what it looked like, this space before the Grange modified it about 1930. And the building had movable partitions. There was a separate section, as Cynthia said, for women's business meetings and men's business meetings. There were temporary partitions that came down called shutters, and they survived until 1930. The feeling was very much like this one, which is 9 partners. It's whitewashed walls, plaster walls, unfinished wood, but with a very good patina. This is pretty much like what Creek Meeting House was like. Very unique character, and if this were, character were restored without the benches, but we think should happen is the space should be restored, and it could be used for any number of uses, including public meetings, exhibitions, storage. And to help in the analysis of the building, this is a drawing that was made in our office, and it shows in a cutaway form what the space was like inside. And we use this to help formulate the plans for the restoration as well as the analysis of the buildings. And now Shannon will take us through the findings about the building and what the detailed recommendations are.
Okay. So we were very excited to work on this HSR. An HSR is kind of a guide for the restoration, but it also deals with recommendations for preserving the building and also for future use. When we were working on this HSR, kind of our project goal or our vision of the restoration, or the first phase of the restoration, I guess, was to make this building work for a larger version or a larger portion of the community. So I guess it would be to make it work for you. Historic Structures Report. That's what that's what we put together, and that's what Jack was talking about a little bit earlier. Yeah, good question. So pretty much what we decided that this building really should be used for is, our goal is trying to restore it to its original volume. So as Jack showed you with this image, there originally was an opening in the middle of the building, which you can actually see right here if you look above you, and you can see the seam where that opening was. There's a kind of a change in the texture of the plaster. You see a rough texture over here and then a smoother plaster. The smoother plaster was installed in 1930, so that kind of shows you where the opening was. So our goal was to restore that opening that you can see in the historic photo. And by doing that, we'd be creating a larger space that could be used for gatherings, could be used as a meeting hall. It would pretty much create kind of a dramatic 2-story space, quite an intriguing space that people would want to gather in. So pretty much we decided that kind of the project goals and what we wanted to do was pretty much restore the interior to its historic volumes and also restore the historic finishes, which, as Jack told you earlier, with whitewashed walls, woodwork that was its normal, natural, not painted, it was natural woodwork. So that was kind of the goal, and I feel like that's a goal that's very obtainable also, because as Jack said, a lot of the historic fabric is here. It's just been covered by other additive modifications over the years. So in order to do that, another thing that we think that should be done is, if we're going to make this a large volume, we recommend relocating the kitchen, which is over here, and also relocating kind of the modern wall partitions, which you can see over by the storage closet. Also on the floor above, there are some wall partitions. We think that we should restore, as I said, the historic finishes, so probably a paint analysis would need to be done as well to determine what the original paint was. What we have discovered also, this is the second floor, and you can see there the kind of the modern partition that we would remove. We discovered that by opening the floor, we're going to change the square footage of the building. which that changes what the code says we have to do for exiting. So if we were to remove this area of the floor, the square footage would be small enough that we could restore, pretty much, you would not have to do much work. You'd have to install new railings, maybe some new signage on these 2 front historic stairs, and they could be your 2 means of egress from upstairs. So what that would allow you to do is to remove the kind of modern fire stair over here on the west side that's in disrepair right now. So it would allow you to remove that, which would be beneficial for later use when you do some work on the addition, which I'll get to in a minute. Okay, that's the fire stair that I'm talking about. Okay, so also though, this is I told you about the main goals for the restoration, but we also think the restoration should include changes that make your day-to-day operation in this building easier for the Historical Society. Some of those changes would include updating the mechanical and electrical system. We would look to make an energy efficient system that could possibly be located in the attic or in basement areas. We replace unsafe electrical that is throughout the building right now. Also, as Rich can attest to, there is a powder post beetle infestation that was recently discovered in the addition. So the addition is in disrepair. It definitely will need to be rebuilt or restored and redesigned in the future. So kind of talking about the addition, let me see what image I should show you. Okay, so basically, we think that the initial phase should include restoration on this building, but in a later phase, definitely there needs to be work to do on a new addition. The present addition is in disrepair. There's the powder post beetle infestation. The new addition should contain multiple accessible bathrooms, a sprinkler kitchen. We should have a basement which would have storage and mechanical. And then once funding and siting is better understood, design options for this new addition will be discussed with the Historical Society. So that's something that we're excited to talk about in the future, I guess. So just the following are just, we also did elevations for the HSR, measured drawings of the building. And then actually, just what I want to talk about briefly is something that Cynthia talked about earlier. I just wanted to show you the results of the repointing job that was done earlier on the gable ends of the meeting house. And I don't know if you can see in the photo, that definitely looks different up higher where the gable is and down lower where the masonry as it is now exists. And the main reason for that is something that we write a lot about in the Historic Structures Report. And basically, previously, this building had a lot of different repointing campaigns where inappropriate mortar was used, a hard mortar. And very often, the mortar also wasn't used in the stone joints. It was used outside of the stone joints and it overlaps onto some of the stone work. So as you can see from here, the pointing up above is done appropriately. And down below, you have a different type of mortar down below where the mortar actually covers over some of the stones. So we're really excited also to repoint the rest of the building so it can look more like the gable end, which is the appropriate pointing. This is just an image again of the building as we think that it was historically. Once again, I just kind of want to talk about the restoration. We're talking about opening up the volumes. We're not talking about restoring the partition walls, restoring any of the seating, but this is to show you what it once was like, I guess. But we are hoping that we could have a volume, where this volume is located here, and the interior finishes could be as they're shown in this drawing. I guess that's where I wrap up. Okay. Yeah.
Since the walls are stone, where would the ductwork go? Removing.
Yeah, we are talking. Talking about removing the ductwork, and we have to get a mechanical engineer on board, but what we've been talking about doing is having what they call a split system, which would allow us to locate the mechanical equipment up in the attic and possibly outside. So basically this is a forced air system, it just wouldn't be the same kind of electrical system. That's what or mechanical system. That's what we've been talking about now, but we definitely need to get a mechanical engineer on board to design a little further, so.
Wondering a little Charlie's arm in Poughkeepsie, and the acoustics are horrendous. The acoustics here are rather nice, and I wonder about opening this up. I would imagine that originally they were good acoustics for the meeting, but I just wondered if you'd considered that a bit.
I would think so. I think that definitely has to be considered. There definitely would be some acoustical changes. Another thing that I didn't mention is on the second floor now, where we kind of have a fiberboard ceiling. Originally, historically, that did not exist, and instead the attic floorboards and the beams were exposed. That's another change we think that could be made very inexpensively to expose that once again. But again, that probably would have to be looked at. I mean, I understand there's some changes from what was done historically, but we could bring, when the time comes that we could bring an acoustician aboard, we could, that's something that definitely we can think about.
What is the assumed use of the second level?
Oh, that's something that we were talking about, and Cynthia, you can chime in as well, but we're, just talking about that before the meeting, actually, so.
We're not really sure, but we do know that we want to open up the space. We have one way will be to mount the existing storage of archival boxes and museum collections along the perimeter in glass-fronted cases. Or we would find alternative location for those collections. So we're not sure right now. We do know that the way it is right now is dangerous. We haven't had a structural engineer in to look at it, but it's a very heavy load to be particularly over the part of the building that was infilled in the 1930s. So we want at the very least to move the collections to the perimeter, maybe even find another home for them if that's possible. If we're able to keep it open, then that second floor can function as additional gallery space, additional space if there's a large group gathered here, there could be seating. One of the things when the when the Friends used this building, the design was such that against this wall, the north wall, were a series of tiered benches which were used by the elders and the ministers of the congregation. Other folks sat on flat benches facing them, so those were called the facing benches. The way the opening was designed, everybody upstairs could hear and see the elders on the facing benches. So we know it had pretty good acoustics at the time, just from that. But so the idea would be that would be ancillary space that could be used for exhibits upstairs, could be used for overflow seating if there was a social event upstairs, could be used for overflow seating if there's a performance downstairs. It all depends on how we can manage to decide what to do with the archive and the museum collections. And so that's why we are kind of holding that off until phase 4, once we've worked our way through so many other aspects of it.
So, assuming public accessibility, what would be the plans for accessible access to the second level?
That would remain inaccessible, but it would have visual access to it, but it would not be accessible to people who might be in wheelchairs. But we can provide, for exhibits, we can provide views of that, which is entirely done
You
by...
think that would be in conformity with ADA?
Yes.
Yeah. With ADA, the whole building doesn't have to be accessible. This first floor would be completely accessible with the, including the bathrooms. The second floor would not be accessible, and the reason for that is that there's no way that an elevator or some sort of vertical circulation element could be inserted in the building without diminishing its what they call character defining features. And with ADA, when it was first developed, this is a real question. If you've been to some place like Old Sturbridge Village, it's all small houses, and none of the upper floors are accessible. They can't be. And ADA is very interesting because it's not a building code type piece of legislation, civil rights legislation. And so how it's enforced is that people take it to the Justice Department and then they bring suit. The first thing, or one of the first things the Department of Justice did was a series of films, videos, on how to treat historic buildings under ADA, and they used Old Sturbridge Village as a model. And what they said was that, and it would be the same thing here. If people came here and they wanted to see something on the third floor, like an exhibit that was up there, the way to provide that accessibility is to have some place in the accessible part of the building where people can see a video of everything that's up there. And the argument was made that, and one of the first ADA studies on a large scale for historic property was the University of Virginia, which the buildings and the grounds are not accessible. But what you can do to provide the level of accessibility that's required by the law. And it's complicated because ADA is not just for people who have ambulatory problems. It's visual, it's hearing, and so that a program has to be developed, and it was developed at UVA as a model to accommodate all those different things. But that's a very good concern, and the building has to be accessible. But what that means is not the same thing to everyone.
Are there any other questions? We'll have questions and answers later also. So I'm going to move on to the next discussion that we'd like to have, which involves a partnership with the Friends Cemetery Association. And I'm glad to see our colleagues here to join with us, and we hope have a good conversation about this. The Creek Meeting House and the Friends Cemetery, as you might imagine, have a long history of being together. Construction began on the Meeting House in 1777. I spent some time doing research in Quaker minutes, and the very first time that the burying ground, is what they called it, the very first time that the burying ground is mentioned was September of 1779, when 3 overseers were appointed. And so the building was still under construction, but I suspect they were already beginning the burial ground at that moment and needed some people to oversee it. They continued as a single entity, the Creek Meeting House and the burying ground, until 1938, when the present boundaries between the cemetery and the Meeting House land were established. The Friends had sold the Meeting House to the Upton Lake Grange in 1927. Today, both the Meeting House and the cemetery share a single National Register listing. So as far as the National Park Service is concerned, we are together. We are a joint entity. With the restoration of the Creek Meeting House, the Historical Society looks forward to renewing this close relationship between the Meeting House and the cemetery, as it has historically existed. We have asked the Cemetery Board for permission to purchase a small amount of vacant land that is adjacent to the building to give the Meeting House breathing room to construct facilities necessary to making the building fully functional as a center for community activities today, in the 21st century. When the boundary lines were drawn between the meeting house and the shed addition, the little addition along the side, only 2 feet remain from the edge of our frame addition and the chain link fence that is the boundary with the meeting house. We've recently commissioned a new survey, a copy of which is on the table, and I invite you to take a look at it. And I'm happy to tell you that the surveyor found that the 1938 survey and the boundaries that were established at that time, which are basically marked by the chain link fence, are good. They are accurate. And as I said, our plans are not complete for the restoration, but we would welcome the Cemetery Association's participation as part of the planning team to make sure that the cemetery needs are met, as well as those of the Historical Society and the community. In partnership, the cemetery could help us design an addition to the Creek Meeting House that provides a more attractive background for the cemetery and those family members who visit loved ones buried there. Because regulations concerning properties on the National Register, because of regulations, the west side of the Creek Meeting House is the only place where additional space can be added. We have to protect the public view from the road. Any addition that we would do would have to be small and very inconspicuous from the road. Not large, small. In partnership with the Cemetery Association, the Historical Society would welcome the use of the building as a space for gatherings before or after burials. We think that could be a real wonderful way to reunite these two historic properties. The Historical Society could assist the cemetery in writing and cleaning gravestones and renewing landscaping to make the cemetery more attractive. We're willing to help. The Historical Society could develop educational programming based on the burials there. With the Historical Society's guidance, students could undertake research on the people buried there, which would give the students and the community a deeper understanding of Clinton and a connection to our shared past. As an example, as I was preparing for this talk, I was looking at some of the records on the burials, and I discovered a man named Isaac Sands and his 11-month-old son, Sylvester, were buried here in 1852. They were victims of a tragic fire that engulfed the steamship Henry Clay, which caught fire while racing another steamboat on the Hudson River. This is what they did to try to somehow attract customers, the fastest boat. 50 of the 500 passengers on the Henry Clay died, including the noted landscape architect A.J. Downing, who was responsible for much of the romantic landscape here in the Hudson Valley and in other parts of our country. The tragedy was comparable to the sinking of the Titanic in its day. That's one story that can be told from what has happened and remains part of the history of that little cemetery. We know the Cemetery Association has been reluctant to support the Historical Society in the belief that using a portion of vacant cemetery land for an addition to the Creek Meeting House would be sacrilegious. My research in the Quaker archives at Swarthmore College revealed that the Friends themselves willingly sold a portion of the cemetery to the Poughkeepsie and Eastern Railroad to run a rail line through land that had been their burying ground in 1870. With the monies received, the Friends, we think, were able to make improvements to the Creek Meeting House, including the front porch and a slate roof. We hope that this public workshop will convince the cemetery board that improving the Creek Meeting House and making it more useful to our community will ensure that both the cemetery and the meeting house can continue to serve as vital parts of the town of Clinton. We have invited Pastor Tom Hartley of the Clinton Alliance Church in Schultzville to join us this evening to speak to the question of Quaker beliefs regarding cemeteries as sacred ground. The Historical Society is proud to have awarded Pastor Hartley and his wife Carol our Preservation Award last spring for the fine work that they have done in preserving the historic Clinton Alliance Church in Schultzville. Pastor Hartley and Carol have served our community for 43 years. Unfortunately, they are soon to leave us. They are soon to retire. But before leaving us, Pastor Hartley has agreed to help us convince the cemetery board and the community that the practical Quakers who built the meeting house in 1777 would like nothing more than to see the creek continue as a gathering place for the people of Clinton in the 21st century and beyond. So, Pastor Hartley, will you join us up here?
Convince is a precarious word. I've been preaching for 45 years, and I've determined I can't convince anybody of anything. So, I'm not in a position to make a proposition because I wield no power, no influence. I offer you simply an observation, a suggestion. I heard about the dilemma and what they're trying to achieve, and the concern over the piece of property and the cemetery. And so I thought, well, maybe I can help a little. This is a huge endeavor. They've asked me to address a very tiny piece of it, so I'm going to endeavor to be concise. That little piece is important because it will start, or it will become a no start to the entire project, and that's that little piece of property. And so, first I was asked was, what do you understand about Quaker theology and the idea of sacred ground? Because there was a concern that the Cemetery Association was concerned that their job was to protect this piece of territory and honor not only those who are laid to rest there, but also honor the trust that was given to them, all right? I thought about it for a little bit, and I thought, you know, our theological views are very similar to those of the Quakers. And I know that because 4 of Tom Angel's sons, with their families and their infinite number of children, attend my church, okay? And so I'm not an expert on Quaker theology, but I thought, no, the Quakers are a practical folk. The idea of a sacred cemetery, I know that Jewish people see their cemetery in a certain way. I know that Catholic people see their cemetery grounds in a certain way. And certain people are not qualified to be laid to rest there. It was my understanding that Quakers were much more practical folk, and that ground served 2 purposes. One, it was a good thing to plow up and put seeds in and plant a crop on. Or you could grow grass and let the cows eat it and raise livestock. They were farmers. The other thing it's good for is burying people. So I talked to Tom Angel, and I think most of you know Tom, and I said, Tom, what's the story? I said, I'm not an expert, you are. And he said, no. He says there is no such thing as sacred ground. Okay, it's just ground. It's just ground. And whether you're not, you agree with that idea, I'm simply saying that Tom Angel, who is the expert, said that's the case. My thought was simply this, and again, I just offer it to you as an observation and as a suggestion. I have nothing to gain. I'm going to Florida. I'm not coming back. And so if this whole thing crashes and burns, that's not my issue, okay? But But I am part of this community. I appreciate being part of this community. My wife and I do. For 43 years, this has been home. I come from Ohio, a very strange place out there in the Midwest. And my wife grew up in Walden. But this will always be our home. They'll bury me somewhere down there in the godless sand in Florida, but this is home. So I simply offer you this. I think both organizations would benefit greatly from helping each other. There was a time when that cemetery and this building were one, right? In the course of time, things change hands and things happen. And it would be nice to see this beautiful building and that beautiful cemetery preserved and rightly preserved. It'd be a wonderful thing for it to become a historical site that was visited. And so I guess what I am suggesting is based on some of the things that Cynthia said, is that if the two groups can cooperate and work together, find some resolution to the issue, and allow the project to move ahead, I think both groups will benefit. Cynthia mentioned that the cemetery might benefit with help in maintaining the grounds and the property. I think that's significant and real. The cemetery out at Schultzville at one time was taken care of by the church. Got to be too costly, so they let it go. And the cemetery society was formed, and they took care of it for a while. You want to know why they let it go? Too costly. And what happened to the Cemetery Association? They deferred it to the town. Now the town cares for it. Small cemeteries ultimately run into cost issues. To put stones back up, to maintain them, to mow the grounds, to weed whack. It's funny, when we pay for a plot, they promise us perpetual care. Perpetual care is quite a proposition. That's a lot of money. We'll take care of you forever, okay? So I think there's a benefit there. I think you can help each other. And in maintenance costs, I think that if you work together, inside this building somewhere, there can be pictures and little pieces of information about the cemetery. And again, as Cynthia kind of alluded to some of those things, that the cemetery and the history of the cemetery could be part of the history of this building. And kind of have a shared vision. And I think that if that happened, everybody benefits. The Cemetery Association certainly can, maintain control of their funds, as the Historical Society maintains control of their funds. But simply to cooperate at this point could be very helpful. And I just feel that that's a possibility. And so I just present it to you as a possibility. I have nothing to gain by sharing this with you. In fact, I hesitated to do this because I didn't want to irritate people who will disagree, because I'm leaving. What's the point in irritating people before I go? I'm reasonably well liked. I don't need people angry at me as I go out the door, okay? But I feel like that there's an opportunity here. An opportunity, again, and I think Cynthia said it, where everybody wins. I think everybody can win. That cemetery should be preserved. This building should be preserved. This represents the American Revolution. This building was here 100 years before they put my building up, 1865. Okay? This is important. And you live in an area with Roosevelt, Vanderbilt, historical sites. So anyway, I promise you I'd be concise, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Hartley. We really appreciate you taking the risk and coming to be with us tonight. I'm now asking one of our trustees, Rich Morris, who I'm sure most of you know, to come. He has a few letters of support to read on behalf of the project, and then we will open it to questions and answers.
I just have a couple. Those of you who know Don Estes knows he talks long, but he writes short. So this from Don says, Don Estes is in support of the Creek Meeting House expansion, building community advancement for the overall good of the residents is a blessing to all. Rebecca, who lives in Marge Fountain's old place, right? Across from the Jeannie Beans, couldn't be here tonight, but said, I would like to encourage cooperation between the two community organizations, the Friends Community Cemetery and the Clinton Historical Society, regarding the Creek Meeting House restoration project. I have reviewed the information regarding the purchase of the land and realize the magnanimous gesture of the Friends Cemetery Society to allow that would benefit our community greatly. I have another letter from Carol Bancroft, who says, although she is the director of the Clinton Library, and she says, although I am unable to attend tonight's workshop, I wanted to express my strong support for the proposed restoration of the Creek Meeting House. The library and the Historical Society have partnered on many programs through the years, and I am grateful for our strong relationship. We have collaborated on lectures at the library town hall, like the Vincent Cookingham's talk about the Jamon murders, an event that drew over 70 people on an icy December night. And at the Creek Meeting House, like when Peter Muir presented his program, A History of Blues, with piano accompaniment. Our organizations are located in different parts of Clinton, and working in partnership allows us to expand our reach. Right now, the library doesn't have its own meeting space, so we use the town hall for the majority of our programming. We are thankful to the town of Clinton for accommodating us. However, sometimes a larger space would be ideal, and sometimes our location is inconvenient for residents who live on the other side of Clinton. I think a realized vision for a renovated and up-to-date meeting space within the Historical Society would be a win for all and a huge benefit to our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. I forgot to pass out the agendas. I'm sorry. There are agendas over there, but there also are some copies of a summary of the restoration program that anybody who might wish to could take. Well, I have 15 copies. If we run out, I will be happy to take your email and email you one. But before we turn to questions and answers, I wonder, are there any other people that want to speak in favor of the program, or should we go to the question and answer session now? Okay. Now, Mike Whitten is going to be our moderator for this part of the evening.
I first want to start by thanking Pastor Hartley for the decades of service to our community. It means a lot to all of us. Thank you, he deserves it. So we had some questions already, but there may be more. If you can start by saying whether the question is for Shannon, Jack, Cynthia, Pastor Hartley, that'd be helpful. And Craig will hand out a microphone if you raise your hand.
Now, I just want to know the parcel size in question that we're talking about. What is the length of it and what is the square footage? So we have an idea of what size we're talking about.
Except you.
As I said, we haven't fully designed it yet, but I think Rich is the man to really answer this question.
Oh, sorry. Okay, that really brings us right to the crux of the matter. The addition that we have now, it was said earlier, but it needs to be impressed, is full of powder post beetles. It has to come off. So when we do that, at that point, right now we have a kitchen that is in this building that is against code. We need to put that in a fireproof, with a fireproof door. So to have 2 accessible bathrooms, a kitchen, a second entrance, and a little room for storage, we need about 6 feet by less than the width of this building from the cemetery. So it's basically 180 square feet. It's a teeny area. So that's what we're talking about in size.
Yes, Arthur Weiland, I'm one of the trustees, and we welcome any additional help at the cemetery. We're very fortunately, we have 3 new members on the trustee list. Hopefully they're younger, they'll last for a while. Trip, are you still active on the? Yeah, we have an interesting thing about the, we have two friends cemeteries, and quite often I am asked which one, to look for people, and which friends do you want to talk to? But the Friends Cemetery is under the authority of New York State.
Correct.
Okay, good. And there are a few things we would have to eventually get permission from New York State.
Correct.
Okay.
We have already been in touch with them. They said that they are the governing body, or whatever you call it, and that we would have to notify them. They would need to know what it was that was changing hands and what the compensation was to the cemetery.
Okay, I've looked at other aspects of it, and I'm glad to have that additional information. Also, it's basically open to the public. I can't remember the Eastern religion that predates Zoroastrianism. We have one potential Zoroastrian burial, and we have Jewish burials, we have Christian burials. So it's not a Quaker cemetery anymore.
Correct.
It's an open to the public cemetery.
Correct. It's a community cemetery. I'm getting out of here. Boy.
Thank you, Rich. Anyone else?
Thank you. I guess a question for Cynthia. First of all, I want to thank you for your acknowledging Catherine. She's an avid supporter of the society, as am I. She had a town planning board meeting tonight, and unfortunately that had to take precedence, but she was disappointed she couldn't be here. I will tell you that the questions I'm going to ask are not from her. I thought of these all on my own. You mentioned 4 phases of the renovation. Phase 1 is, if not totally complete, almost complete, with a budget, I think you said about $1.5 billion. Do you know the numbers, or could you get us the numbers for each of the successive phases? I'm assuming they're not equal.
It's actually in the back of this
Okay, great.
document.
Okay.
You can have a copy of.
Perfect, thank you.
I mean, 1.5 million is the expected overall budget for all 4 phases. So we spent about $140,000 on the ADA compliance and the repointing of the gable ends of the attic. We think that the interior restoration with HVAC, electrical, structural, and code compliance is about $580,000. We think the reconstruction and expansion of the frame addition is about $750,000. And the reorganization of the archives and developing an exhibit plan we don't have any idea. That's to be developed.
All right, thank you. Nothing is inexpensive anymore.
No.
I guess my next question might be for our HSR professionals, maybe Rich, I'm not sure. A two-part question. Is any part of the footprint of the existing building, does that have a basement, a portion of it? Or is it all on slab grade? And if not, how will you have basement access to the proposed new construction in the back?
Okay, I'm back. Sorry. Good question. There is a crawl space under this building that is semi-accessible. It's not, one of our plans is just to level it out a bit, and so that you can get around underneath here. We would not use underneath here. If we're going to excavate under here, it's a big to-do with proper permits. We'd have to do archaeological studies. Everything would have to go through that process. We're not doing that. If we put an addition out, we can have a decent basement where all the mechanicals can go. And it can have an outside entrance, Ron.
That's my question. So you need a larger footprint for a Bilco door, maybe?
The Bilco door would be on the side on our property.
Got it. Thank you.
I'm going.
We'll see about that. Anyone else?
As someone who has raised funds for 15 years, how are you going to raise the $1.5 million? Because that seems like a lot. And is there a timeline for?
It is a lot. We've been writing grants, and some of these grants, if we are successful, are pretty big. So that's the basic strategy, is to try to get state and federal grants to take most of this. However, we have to do some local fundraising as well. So that's the strategy, state and federal grants. Of course, now federal grants are very much up in the air, which is throwing us into, apoplexy. But I hope to resubmit an application that I wrote submitted last March, which was for $750,000, and it's part of the semi-quincentennial, the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. We came very close. They told me some things to do to try to make it better. Ann Chen will help me, I'm sure. And we hope that the funding will be there to continue the 250th anniversary of the Revolution. So that has one more year in it. So that's a big part of it. That's at least half of it. So that's all I can say.
I have a question. Yes. Maybe I'm just a little confused as far as, I don't understand the overall plan of having it as a community center that's built like a Quaker meeting house. So is it going to be a historic site that already has the National Register and it's Quaker with the open interior plan, like the Quaker Meeting House at Chrome Elbow? Or is it going to be a community center for people to go with a kitchen? I don't understand how the two coexist at the same time. I understand how the Grange was as a kid when I grew up here. The Grange was an important part of the community, but it wasn't Quaker. It was the Grange. So how do you coexist a very functional, up-to-date, modern community center for people to go to and make it Quaker?
Well, we're not going to make it Quaker. We're going to make it
Quaker because now
historic.
it's enclosed.
We're going to use the remaining historic building fabric.
Correct.
The original floors, take the paint off of these uprights, and create a volume that will be essentially empty. I mean, it will be a meeting hall.
That's what the Quakers had.
Exactly.
They had to turn it into a community center with HVAC.
Well, it's going to be modern. It's going to have.
Well, that's not Quaker.
Well, we're not being Quakers again. We are restoring the Quaker historic site.
Do you see how I'm confused?
I mean, using, as the Grange used it, they had heating,
Correct. There
lighting,
wasn't-
bathrooms. We're not returning to the 18th century.
Maybe
We're
I
doing
can
what is
help.
called adaptive reuse.
Maybe I can help.
Is using the Quaker floor plan for grants? Is that the underlying use for trying to get grants?
Maybe it's a good, after Pastor Hartley speaks, I think Jack Waite should talk about adaptive reuse.
As the one gentleman pointed out from the cemetery group, that in this historically Quaker cemetery, they have burials of all kinds and all faiths. It's a public cemetery. And so the Quaker is not so much in reference to a religion or a faith as it is in reference to something historical.
Well, I was born Quaker, so I kind of take offense to that. Yes,
Okay.
Quaker is
And as far as the building goes, in our building, we maintained the basic historicity of the structure out of respect for you folks, because you asked us to do it, basically, indirectly. But we had to do more than maintain the historicity of the building. We had to make the building functional. And so, no, in a 1865 Civil War vintage church, you don't have a 75-inch flat screen up in the front. You don't have video and technical stuff and all this other stuff but it's simply a matter, I think it's just a matter of trying to kill two birds with one stone. Is that you're maintaining something historical, and at the same time, you're utilizing it in some practical way, and that way you get double use out of it. So maybe that was the intent.
Well, no, it's the intent. You're not actually making it, you're not returning it to its historical, the way it was. You know what I'm saying? So if you're putting HVAC, everything, I get that. It's historic. It's now functional.
Yeah, you do have to make compromises. You know, historically, there'd be outhouses, but we appreciate bathrooms.
So it's going to be a community center.
Pardon?
It's going to be a community center. It's not going to be Quaker. It's going to be a community center. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be a it's going to be a community center in the old Quaker building. In the same way the Mason Hall now is just offices down at the town hall. And I think the idea is just to get the best use out of it. And like I said, I may be speaking, out of turn, but I think that was the idea. Does that help?
Well, again, I just wanted to have it clarified as to, is it going to be returned to Quaker?
Yeah.
People that are here talking historical, showing us what it was for the Quakers, but you're actually going to make it a community center.
Yeah, you make compromises. To have those bathrooms is a compromise.
But that's not Quaker.
And that's right, it's not Quaker, so it's a compromise.
We're not talking Quaker, we're talking community.
And it's not historical. Years ago, when we started working at the church, we were offered money. We can go to the government and get a grant. And an older, wiser gentleman than a 26-year-old kid, which I was when I started, okay, told me, he says, if you take that money, Tommy, there are strings attached to it. And you're not going to have railing around the porch because that's not historical. And if somebody falls off the porch, you got a problem. You're not going to have a bathroom. You're not going to have air conditioning. So the whole thing does become a compromise. And so you're right. Your observation is right. It's kind of a community center at a historical site. And so you kind of do those compromises as opposed to making it just one or the other.
Yes, I think Pastor Hartley made a lot of good points there. Basically, the idea is adaptive use, and the whole idea that there's a national register now, that's all created in 1966, because before that, historic preservation in this country was saving things like Mount Vernon, the Statue of Liberty. They're major monuments that were basically tourist attractions. And in 1966, there's a decision made by Congress to take a look at how historic buildings were treated in Europe as part of everyday life. And that was brought about by the excesses of programs like the Interstate Highway Program and the Urban Renewal Program, which just wiped out all these buildings, neighborhoods, because George Washington never slept there, or there's the Declaration of Independence wasn't written there. So Congress sent this delegation with the U.S. Conference of Mayors to Europe to look at how historic buildings were integrated in everyday life. And that was partly because they perceived that there is this great influx of American tourists who spend a lot of money to go to Europe to look at historic buildings. So out of that comes the idea of adaptive use, where you take a building like this, you go through the process that we've done with the Historic Structure Report, identify the key character-defining features, and come up with a program to reuse the building for another use, because it's not going to be a Quaker Meeting House again. It'd be very difficult to make this into just an historic house that was restored Quaker Meeting House. If you look at the Quaker Meeting Houses in the Philadelphia area where they're centered, a few of them are still Quaker Meeting Houses. None of them are museums just of Quaker Meeting Houses. So if this building's going to be saved, which is a really important part of the community, is the building, the cemetery, really does a lot to create the special character of the community. You have to use it for an adaptive use. And that idea goes way back to when the Grange acquired the building. They did what they needed to do to make it usable for their functions. And that basically saved the building. Now is the next phase of the preservation of the building. Something has to be done to create a viable use that'll ensure that the building is sustained in the future. And one of the ideas is to restore the space basically the way it was when it was used as a Quaker Meeting House, but use a slightly different focus on reusing it. Use it for public meetings, which essentially the Quaker Meeting Houses were originally. People came together and expressed different ideas, and we're working on one now up outside Rochester, Farmington. That had tremendous importance in the 19th century, because it's not just used for Quaker religious meetings. It was used by people who were interested in broader community issues like women's rights, the rights of Indians, Native Americans, which were at that time persecuted. It was a center of the abolition movement in that part of the country. Frederick Douglass spoke there a number of times. That is the sort of thing that could be accommodated in this building in the future. You know, broader community issues, not just Quaker religious issues. And you do that, the success of that will be how the building's treated, so that you preserve the character of the Quaker building, like the photograph Shannon showed before, but it can be used as for completely different functions and different functions, as these Quaker meeting houses were used historically. And, you know, people have said it's like putting new wine in old bottles.
So I was given the mic because I asked for it. The acreage of the cemetery is about 3.3 acres. When it was surveyed, it was laid out in plots and also indicating past burials. My understanding is the Quakers didn't use permanent burials or shale, which is degraded. So there's a lot of burials in what looks like open ground. So burials and laid out plots is about 2/3 of the cemetery, and 1/3 isn't even marked out yet. And we're still allowing the community to use it on Community Day. Bob Turner has been very good on taking care of it. I've sort of slacked off a little bit at the moment because of chaos, and making sure that people understand they're on cemetery grounds. Those of us who grew up around here remember when the cars were parked over there. We have memories attached to this place. I have a lot of memories. I have a memory of the stage upstairs and things that were done on that stage. And I remember the sheds. I regretted seeing the sheds go. That's part of the character of the community that the Grange couldn't afford to maintain. The idea that you would stimulate interest in the cemetery's activities and keep it active for the public, I think would be a really great boon rather than turning it over to the town. Thank you.
Yeah, I might as well since you did. Hi, I'm Pat Hancock, for those of you who don't know me. Also grew up here on Schultzville Road, as did my mom, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and my great-great-grandmother. So we've been here a while. Tripp was my next-door neighbor. We have been, as a family, always interested in this community. I mean, if I slip and call this the Grange Hall, it's just because I'm old. We were very active, the precursor to the Evangelical Free Church that stands across the road when it was the Clinton Corners Friends Church. We had a structured meeting, not a silent meeting, but a lot of the Friends precepts were held dear. Community Day was a big deal when both of these organizations were working together. I think your plans sound great. My hope is for their success. There's a couple of things that have not come up that I would like to point out. I've written to these or talked to the Historical Society in the past about this. We on the board we are as interested in the cemetery as we are in this building. A lot of family friends, community leaders, local farmers, Sunday school teachers, etc. They're all out there. You know, folks I remember, folks that my grandparents were probably friends with. I want to make sure you're taking every step to ensure success of your new enterprise. I'm thinking mainly about the kitchen. Before we consider land transfer. And in my mind, that means you have to consider the county health department. I'm I'm serving on the Town of Stamford Planning Board right now. I've been on the Town of Clinton CAC. I used to be a real estate appraiser. The health department has a very real effect on lots of things. I was a trustee for 15 years at the Bangor United Methodist Church. We had a nursery school. We leased space to a nursery school. We didn't run it. But as such, we were considered a public water source, and our water was tested quarterly. And we reached a point where there was too much sodium, I think primarily from road salt, and nitrates. Bangor, like Clinton, Clinton Corners predates zoning, so buildings were kind of close. We never did figure out where the nitrates came from. I said, well, can't we just filter it out and call our water softener guy? No, you have to have an engineer. Well, that's expensive. Fortunately, we found a guy who would do it for nothing because we were a church. over the course of 5 years, not one plan, not two plans, 4 plans. Back and forth, back and forth. No, this is not good enough. And no offense to the architects, you're doing a wonderful job, but they are your client. They cannot close you down. The health department can, because we were faced with that threat pretty routinely, that you straighten out your water issue, or we have the ability to close you down. My concern is if you're having, I would think you probably, let's say somebody wanted to have let's say somebody wanted to have a wedding reception here, or something like that, 100 guests. I don't know what your limit is, what you're thinking, 150, 200. At some point, the health department will be interested in where's the well? What's the quality of the water? How close is it to your septic field? If you have a septic field, what are you doing? I mean, something crashed through over here, I remember last year. If you're putting out this kitchen facility for essentially lease, does the health department have a say in how good that kitchen needs to be so that you're protected? Essentially, I mean, they're a pain in the neck to deal with, but in the end, if they give you the stamp of approval, you're protected from a lot of things because the health department said it was okay. It would be a shame 5 or 10 years down the road with all this money invested if the health department came along and said, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, stop. So, I mean, the three of us on the board have pretty different views, but I would like to see more assurances from the county health department before I want to talk about land. And that's just to make sure that this is going to be a success. That's where I'm coming from on it. Okay.
Thank you, Pat. Anyone want to respond to that?
I can just,
Yeah.
again, respond to part of it. Right now, we just have done schematic plans, but as we move further, there's going to be plumbing engineers, civil engineers. We're going to be having a conversation with the health department. I mean, we very much know what has to go in a commercial kitchen. There's 3 sinks. I mean, we're very well versed in this. So as we move on to later stages of design, there will be attention paid to all of that. So.
Well, and all I'm saying is that given all the back and forth that I had with a licensed engineer, I would like to see the approval first before I talk about land.
But we can't get approval if we don't have the land, right?
Well, no,
It's a chicken and egg situation.
We can't do the design.
You can make a plan if it's approved, like a site plan or something. You can have a plan that you submit to the health department.
On land that we don't have access to.
No, not on land, but on. You can tell them what kind of a kitchen and what's going in it. You can tell them what the septic field is going to be like, where the well is, what the quality of the water is. You can do that now.
Sure. But we have to design it. And until we raise the money to do the design, and we don't want to raise money to do a design that is on the wrong land. I mean, it's a chicken and egg situation that. And, I mean, we have had meetings with the planning board and the zoning officer. We can do more of those, but of course we can't get approvals until we've designed it and we have a plan. And that requires, of course, an understanding on the land on which things are going to be built. Maybe somebody else.
You can do plans without owning the land. You can.
Well, why would we pay? But we would have to pay these high-priced architects if we can't just. We have to write grants to get every penny that goes into this. Hold fundraisers. We can't. We're not made of money. We can't just have people do designs for things that we don't have hope of being able to build. What are you pointing at? Oh.
That's just not right.
I don't have figures, but a church in the district down in LaGrange was going to open a nursery school. And they looked at their water and they said, no, you're not, because of the well. You make a good point. But I do know that for a reasonable cost, it might have been $10,000, might have been $20,000, might have been $30,000. The technological equipment to treat almost any water problem can be done for that. And in a project of $1 million plus, $20,000 or $30,000 for water treatment is really piddly. And so it might be helpful, I think you raise a good point, and it might be helpful to find somebody more informed than me, who's guessing, who could tell you what it would cost for a sophisticated water treatment equipment, and make that part of your mechanics. Again, in a job this big, with a price tag this big, this could be investigated. You could get a price on it, and it could be part of the plan, like you said. And I think that could be addressed.
Have you had the water tested? There's a top flight facility in Dutchess County that'll test for all.
We don't have a well yet. The well that we have, we will not be using. A new well will be drilled on this end. There will be a new septic system. That will be, this has all been preliminary gone over. Mm-hmm. We are not going to do all of the final engineering and the final details until we know the project will fly.
Thank you. Good.
And it's just that simple.
So
the preliminary work has been done. We've done it with the planning board. We've done it with the zoning board of appeals. We didn't do it with the zoning board of appeals, but we did it with the zoning administrator, covering all the issues that we wanted to do. All of that preliminary work has indeed been done, but you don't spend money on something that you're not going to do. We take a 2-minute recess. A 1-minute break while we change the battery. That's good.
I did see Reese's hand up, Craig, so when we start again.
We're back.
So we're back, if we can have order in the room. It's Reese's turn to speak.
You don't want to use it? Yell.
Okay, if I can't hear, but I'm not saying much.
Quiet, please.
Is you guys who are on the building committee, Cynthia, who's president of this place, who's an archivist, who's worked on the FDR, who knows what's going on and is not planning on playing any tricks. And weight is a major, somebody's got it on the cover here, that weight is very sensitive. But it should be repeated then, just to answer his things. And also, you already contacted Upstate regarding the cemetery.
Okay, so Rich, if you want to translate.
Hang on.
No. Moving on.
Next.
Is there anyone else with a question?
Yes, we have one.
Yes.
I have a question on the entire project. It sounds like it's a dual project. One is preservation of the building, and then the second, which I think is a great idea, the second phase is developing a community center. And I think it's two separate issues. And my question for the Historical Society, what prevents the Historical Society from selling the building as a viable commercial community center after it's done? And also, I think that any discussions that are being done with the planning board and zoning board. Are there documents to review at this point?
I can answer the second part. The planning board and ZBA meetings are all open, and they all have minutes.
And they've been on the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we haven't.
Oh, you haven't yet?
No, we haven't.
All right, so...
Let me answer that.
Okay.
We asked the head of the planning board and the zoning administrator in town to come here and go over everything with us that we were planning on doing so that we weren't going down a road that was silly. And they said, no, you have no issues with what you're trying to do. We cannot officially go in front of either one of the boards until we have our plans together. We're in the preliminary stage, but it all depends upon, can we do an expansion or not? There's no point in going further if we can't.
That's a separate part. Your interior renovation is separate, your ADA compliance is separate.
But there's no point in doing it if we don't have... Okay, anyway, that's...
And when they do go, have plans and go in front of the planning board, it'll be on the agenda. All those meetings are open, and all those meetings have minutes.
I'd like to
Call me.
answer the second
Yeah.
part of the question. There was the question about what prevents us from selling the building after we've made it a beautiful, wonderful, restored historic site and community center. Well, we're writing our grants to the federal government and the state government. And these will be covered, if we get the money, we will have to sign long-term easements, which basically say that we will do everything to maintain this as an historic site open to the public. Depending on the amount of money we get, it can be 25 years, it can be 50 years. That's what's preventing us from selling the building. We will not be able to. Besides, our mission, of course, is to preserve this building and to conduct historical programs here. But if you're worried that we might, squelch on that, just know that both the federal and the state government, if they invest in this project, are going to want to make sure that it has long-term benefit to the people. Thank you.
If you've quoted 25 or 50 years, that's admirable. I'm on the board, as a few of us are here. We are responsible for the grounds around your perimeter here in perpetuity. We've been here better than 250 years. There is no end to our responsibilities except when we can no longer afford it. Most of us work here gratis, pro bono. I appreciate your effort to help us. I'll take a $20 bill tonight if you happen to have one. I can use it for things on my cemetery, our cemetery. It's a different species here. I have issue with you. This is a burial site. Sacred land. Now, maybe not every location is filled, but we could put one in tonight. These people came and purchased sites here with a certain structure, a certain area. The addition of a room out back, for what? Fast food? You're trying to make a community, but then use the rules as a Quaker. Okay, it's sales pitch. Go to the Quaker place. Well, no, it's a community house. Have you done a market study? So again, you've irritated me. Work your plans, get prior approval, prior whatever. If you've met with the individual, nice. And why is the town board here? It's a matter of, no, this is sacred land for everyone who bought it and everyone who will be buying it. If no one's there at the moment that we speak, we can put someone there right now, and that'll eliminate your expansion. But we'll have a workshop here and review everything. And I'm surprised. Where's the historical guy? He ran somewhere. It's a profound, if this is a historical structure, how is the county approving? Oh yeah, that's okay. Inside renovations, I got you. Leaky roof, I got you. Outside the building, as you said, we can go out back. Can't go out front. And there is separation from cemeteries to your septic. You can bring a bottle of water in, so that takes care of the well issue. But you still have requirements to stay away from us a certain distance. Next.
Thank you, Bob. Is there anyone else?
On what do
Use the
you
mic.
base the need for a community center? We don't have much of a community here. We have, the odd community day that I found embarrassing, and I don't see a large number of groups wanting to hold events or weddings or anything in a restored historic building. I mean, restore it for aesthetics if you want to, but turning it into a community center, I think, doesn't serve anybody's real needs in this location.
I had my 70th birthday party here last week.
Well, congratulations. And where did everybody park when this community,
Well, there weren't, it doesn't hold.
but you're contemplating a surge in community use, or at least Cynthia is. And that's on what she's basing her grant proposals, I assume, on the combination of the history and the community stuff. I mean, that makes sense. But the fact is, do we really need a new community center here? I think that's sort of a fake need in this location. I just do.
Well, I live down the road, and I
Jean, do you want to use the mic?
I live down the road from here. I walked over. I always walk over. And I enjoy the use of this building for the Historical Society programs, Community Day, the great exhibits that happen every summer. For my 70th birthday party, it was for the holiday gatherings, that happen here, the desserts on the progressive dinners. I think it's already an asset to the community that gets good, solid use. And I would personally love to see it become even better equipped to do that. In a way that's
Meeting a real need.
yes, I think it is. Well, it's meeting my needs. It's me. I can only speak for myself, but it's meeting my needs. Who wants the mic?
So I think we're wrapping up, but do we have any final questions? Up there too.
I have a few. One is opening up the middle. Is that cheaper than repairing the floor?
Opening up the middle is cheaper than something.
The reason for opening up the floor, one is to make this a better place for people to meet. It would be a more inviting place to meet than its present form. But what it does is, as Shannon said, it brings down the second floor areas so that the two existing stairways meet the letter of the code, and that gives you more usable space upstairs and save you the money of rebuilding the fire escapes, which is illegal. It doesn't meet the modern code. It's got to have a roof over it. You've got to have certain tread to riser relationships and landings. So if the building's going to be used for something more than it's used for now, which is the key to making the building more sustainable and usable and economically viable in the future, it is cheaper and much more beneficial to open up that floor.
Okay, because it's losing a lot of space, a lot of storage area. And if you want to have more people in here, then having the second floor and putting money into a fire escape would make more sense, in my opinion. Just throwing that out there. The other thing is, I just want to mention that we have 20 minutes away, half an hour, a fully original Quaker meeting house where you can see everything that's there. It's been there since, well, they say 1810. I think it's earlier than that, but I can't prove it. So just trying to make this look like a Quaker meeting house when there's one that's original, is that really necessary? And, all right, I'm throwing things out there. I am a devil's advocate type person, so I want the stuff out there, I want people thinking about it, okay? Oh my goodness, I got this. Just a point of interest, the cemetery was separated from the church in 1914. New York State made all cemeteries and churches separate and incorporate in 1914. All right? Done. So it's not 1930 or anything else. 1914, that became its own cemetery.
1919, they reorganized, I have the dust.
Okay. Well, Crum Elbow's incorporation stamp was 1914, and I got from the cemetery lady.
But I didn't run across the state law, but I ran across this reorganization
Okay.
in 1919.
Pretty sure it was the state law.
Yeah.
That was 1914. Okay. I mean, is it possible to do something over there? It's already off, making it a valid kitchen, putting in a fireproof door, putting in straight up kitchen, walls that work. An idea. Yes, that needs to come out and be redone, but that would be within the parameters and not come into this whole, we need money land from the cemetery. All right, so that should be something, in my opinion, that should be at least looked at. I haven't heard that. We can get creative about things, maybe. Is there a possibility of leasing land? But has anybody done anything to make sure that there aren't any bodies buried in the land that you want? As it was already said, there are an awful lot of burials that have no stones or anything else. And I can guarantee, maybe not this cemetery, but there have been times you go with the excavator to dig a new grave and it's like, oops, it's one that's there already. I know from experience, okay? And there's a really good chance this water is bad. There's a cemetery right there. There's been decomposing bodies for over 200 years. So that has to be figured in. You should be doing any planning that the water is bad. Not might be, but is bad, okay? And this is something, it's not going to win me any friends, but I'm kind of upset that the town board sponsored this to pressure the cemetery to sell. Because that's what everything here has been about. This cemetery has to sell, the cemetery has to sell, the cemetery has to sell. That really is offensive because something happens when they run out of money, the town board has to take this over. The town highway department has to spend money for it. So taking land that they might use isn't fiscally responsible for the cemetery. And I'm done.
We have one more comment.
Partially cemetery board meeting.
She said no more. Who? The one that had left. No comment.
Okay.
Arthur, finish us up.
Oh, please, somebody else after.
No.
Those are some good thoughts. Sorry. So you have a $750,000 grant, huge, based on a design that you really like. And if you had to redesign this and just use the land that you own and just dig a basement where you own and just redo the shed, that's a lot of work. And yet you would still have space, mechanicals, you would not have the same kind of kitchen that you might want, but having eaten lots of meals here and drunk lots of water here, I haven't suffered. So people, when we've had functions here, we brought in food. So you can do things with this building without having a public kitchen. I also I've had some discussions about the septic, and I've been told that it's quite reasonable to engineer the parking area for a septic disposal area that can be driven on eventually. This is an engineering problem and not a land use problem, from what I've been told by talking to people. Just wanted to add that. Somebody has it. Wish everybody a good night.
I want to thank everyone for their thoughtful questions and comments, and the board for all of their informative answers. And I think there are refreshments. Do you want to finish this up?
I want to thank everybody for coming and for frankly sharing your ideas about this. We will think about them. It sounds kind of promising to me. I think it's time for us to sit down with the cemetery people and talk about how we can work together on this. They brought up some questions that I think are good ones, and we will try to consider them. And when we have considered what Arthur just suggested, and it wouldn't make it a functional place. The word community center makes people think of something different from what we have in mind. It will be small scale, true. But we do believe that for it to function properly, we need to have 6 feet of space. That's all we're asking, 6 feet of space. 6 feet of space that is part of a walkway. It's currently a walkway. Of course, before we did anything, we would make sure that nobody's buried there. We wouldn't be going out there with a backhoe to dig it up. But we would certainly appreciate consideration of this really modest request to try and make this building, as I think we just heard from Ms. McAvoy, that she thinks she would just like to see it better equipped to do what it already does. And that's all we're asking. Make it better equipped to do what it's already doing and to bring in more people from the community to use it. We think that if it's more attractive, people will want to use it. I mean, it seems to me that nobody would want to continue to come into this building with these low-hanging, ugly ducts hanging over our heads. I mean, we can't use this building as a point of pride. We can use it. You can use it like a clubhouse, and it can go on like that with some patchwork things here and there. But what we're trying to do is say to people that there's a vision here for a beautiful building that will be, this is a point of pride, but I'm saying bigger point of pride. There are other Quaker meeting houses. They are perfectly original. They're filled with benches. They do not have an active group of historical society members willing to program them and turn them into something vital. That's the difference. We want to return it. We want people to appreciate it as a Revolutionary War site. We want them to understand things about why there are 2 front doors. We want them to understand why the Quakers are so important to our American history. We want to understand the relationship between the Quakers here and the Quakers out there that Jack was talking about, who started the women's rights movement, were leaders in the abolitionism. Folks here are connected to those folks. We want to make those kinds of connections real for people, and we want to make it beautiful. That's all. We just want it to be pretty, gorgeous, vital, and alive. That's the proposal. And that's it. And I'm closing.
There are refreshments, and again, I have my summaries.